Imagine dedicating decades to your career, pouring your experience into building something significant, only to face an automatic, predetermined pay cut just as you near retirement. You're effectively being told your invaluable experience is suddenly worth less simply because of your age.
Yeah, that's a tough scenario to picture.
This isn't a dystopian novel. It's the very real and increasingly controversial peak wage system that many workers in South Korea are currently navigating.
It really is.
Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this truly perplexing policy, unraveling not just its mechanics and its legality, but also the startling reasons it came into being.
Right.
And crucially, we'll ask whether it still holds up in a rapidly changing world, especially given South Korea's unprecedented demographic shifts.
That's right. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore whether a system designed for one era remains reasonable and effective in another. We'll be drawing insights from comprehensive reports by Human Rights Watch and The Guardian, legal analyses from the South Korean Supreme Court, and discussions from various sources to truly understand all the facets of this policy and its profound implications.
So let's start with the basics for anyone encountering this for the first time. What exactly is this peak wage system we're talking about? How does it actually work on the ground?
Okay. At its core, the peak wage system is a labor policy where the salaries of older workers are systematically reduced each year as they approach what's considered retirement age.
Systematically reduced.
Okay. Yeah, this reduction typically kicks in about 3 to 5 years before the mandatory retirement age, which in South Korea is commonly set at 60.
So around age 55 or 57, maybe?
Exactly. So, for example, a worker might see their salary begin to decline from age 55 or 57.
And what was the original thinking behind this? Why implement something like that?
Well, the original purpose behind this system was quite explicit, designed with two main goals in mind, particularly in the context of South Korea's unique corporate culture.
Okay, two goals.
First, it aimed to use the financial savings from these wage cuts to help companies hire younger employees.
Okay. Freeing up money for new jobs.
Precisely. The idea was to free up funds to create new entry-level positions. Second, the policy intended to boost overall productivity by integrating new, younger talent into the workforce.
Under the assumption that younger meant more productive.
Under that assumption, yes, that a younger workforce meant a more dynamic one.
The immediate impact of this system is pretty striking and, frankly, quite brutal for many. Workers over 60, on average, earn about 29% less than their younger colleagues.
Almost a third less. That's significant.
That's nearly a third of their earning potential vanished, purely due to their age. And what's even more alarming, a staggering 70%, almost three-quarters of these experienced workers are then shunted into insecure employment after these cuts take effect.
70%, wow.
That's a massive number, and it certainly raises immediate questions about fairness and economic stability for an entire generation.
Absolutely, it's a profound challenge for many.
And with such a stark impact on workers' lives, the inevitable question arises, how does this peak wage system actually fare when challenged in South Korea's legal system? Is it considered lawful?
Yeah.
Because from the outside, it sounds like a clear case of age discrimination.
Right. You're hitting on the core legal tension here, and it's far from a simple, straightforward answer. The Supreme Court of South Korea has addressed this repeatedly.
Okay.
And its rulings are highly nuanced, often on a case-by-case basis.
So no blanket yes or no?
Not really. In a significant May 2022 ruling, the court stated that if wages are cut, it must be for an appropriate reason, such as the extension of the retirement age.
An appropriate reason, like extending retirement.
Exactly. Essentially, the legality hinges on a delicate balance of factors unique to each case. The system's stated purpose, the employer's justification for the cut, its necessity, and crucially, the level of the cut itself.
The amount matters.
It does. One labor law professor even suggested that a cut exceeding 1/3 of the regular wage might be deemed unacceptable, hinting at a practical limit.
Okay, that makes sense. But then you mentioned another ruling.
Yes, just 2 years later, we saw a different outcome in a March 2024 ruling concerning a major bank. In that instance, the peak wage system was actually found justifiable.
Justifiable. Why the difference?
Well, the court reasoned that its aim of hiring experienced workers under an efficient labor cost system was reasonable. And importantly, the wage reduction, which amounted to a 10% loss over the period it was applied, was accompanied by an extension of the mandatory retirement age.
So they got something in return.
Kind of. On top of that, there were reductions in hours and duties and other incentives. The court ultimately did not consider this a significant disadvantage to the workers.
So it really is a fascinating tightrope walk the courts are performing. It seems the devil is truly in the details of how the system is implemented.
Very much so.
But if the legality hinges so much on appropriate reasons and not significant disadvantage, doesn't it feel like there's a loophole for employers? What's the overarching legal philosophy that even permits age-based wage cuts in the first place?
That's where the broader legal framework comes into play, and it's a point of major contention. The Act on Prohibition of Age Discrimination in Employment and Elderly Employment Promotion in South Korea.
Okay.
It actually allows for specific exceptions to the general prohibition on age discrimination in certain areas.
Exceptions built into the law itself.
Yes. This includes mandatory retirement and significantly wage structures linked to it.
Ah.
What this means in practice is that employers aren't always required to justify such differential treatment on reasonable grounds under the letter of the law.
So the bar isn't always that high for justification.
Effectively, yes. And Human Rights Watch, for example, views this specific legal allowance as fundamentally incompatible with international human rights standards, arguing it effectively endorses age-based discrimination.
Right. Okay. Given these legal complexities and the direct, often devastating impact on their livelihoods, it begs the question, are the workers themselves simply accepting these changes?
Or are they pushing back?
Yeah, are they pushing back against a system that feels increasingly outdated?
Not at all. There's significant and growing resistance. Major unions are actively pushing back, demanding either the outright abolition of the system or significant adjustments.
So union action is happening.
Definitely. We're seeing this play out at some of South Korea's largest and most well-known companies. Unions at Samsung Display, Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix.
Big names.
Huge names. SK Hynix, which cut salaries by 5% annually after an employee turns 58, and LG Electronics, which cuts 10% annually for 3 years after age 58.
Wow, those are steep cuts.
They are. And the unions at these places are all at the forefront of this movement. They're making it abundantly clear that this system, as it stands, is no longer acceptable.
Let's dive deeper into the historical context then. Why did South Korea adopt this system in the first place? What were the driving forces behind such a unique and, to some, discriminatory policy?
It was largely a pragmatic response, really, to intense economic pressures and a deeply ingrained labor culture.
Okay, what kind of culture?
Well, South Korea traditionally valued long tenure and a kind of lifetime employment model, particularly in its massive family-controlled conglomerates known as chaebol, where job security often meant a job for life.
Right, the chaebol structure.
Exactly. The peak wage system emerged in the late 1990s and early 2000s, especially after the Asian financial crisis.
Ah, the crisis was a trigger.
A major one. It emerged as a way to manage soaring labor costs within this rigid structure, while also trying to create pathways for younger workers to enter the workforce, particularly as youth unemployment became a concern.
So cost control plus youth employment.
That was the idea. And this also reflects a broader societal shift that occurred as South Korea rapidly industrialized.
So,
In traditional agricultural societies, older persons were often highly respected for their wisdom and experience.
sure.
However, from the industrial to the post-industrial era, there was a prevalent, though often unsubstantiated, perception that older workers became less productive, slower, or less adaptable.
A perception, you say. Not necessarily reality.
Not necessarily reality, no. This belief, despite a lack of supporting evidence, contributed significantly to the system's adoption. It was seen as a way to maintain corporate agility and make space for younger, fresher talent.
So the very premise this system was built on, the idea of declining productivity with age, turns out to be largely a myth, disproven by actual research.
Right.
That's a profound revelation, suggesting this policy might be tackling a problem that doesn't fully exist, or at least not in the way it was conceived.
Exactly. It's a common assumption that older workers slow down, become less innovative, or make more errors.
Yeah, you hear that kind of thing.
But what the data from South Korea, and even from rigorous studies in places like German car manufacturers, emphatically shows is the exact opposite. Aging is not associated with lower work productivity.
Not associated at all.
No. Some studies on German car manufacturers, for instance, even showed older workers made fewer errors, balancing out any speed differences with younger workers.
Fewer errors. Interesting.
It completely upends a key justification for this entire system, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And this brings us right to the present. South Korea is facing an unprecedented demographic shift, the world's lowest birth rate and a rapidly aging population.
A huge
So the crucial question becomes, does the peak wage system still make sense or even serve its original purpose in this drastically new reality?
It's a significant looming challenge that fundamentally redefines the context for this system. South Korea is projected to become a super-aged society by 2025, meaning over 20% of its population will be aged 65 or older. By 2025, that's next year.
Wow, that's soon.
Yeah. And by 2060, this figure is expected to exceed 41%.
41% over 65. That's staggering.
It creates immense economic pressure, particularly on social welfare systems. The National Pension Fund, for example, is potentially facing depletion within decades without major reform.
Right.
The country simply won't have enough working-age people to support its retirees at current rates.
Given these stark demographic realities, the idea of cutting older workers' pay to hire younger ones seems almost counterintuitive now, doesn't it?
It really does.
Is the system actually helping youth employment as it was intended to? Or is it now becoming counterproductive, given the impending labor shortages?
Well, evidence suggests limited direct benefit to youth employment, which is another crucial insight here.
Limited benefit.
Yeah. While the youth employment rate for ages 15-29 did increase slightly from 42% in 2015 to 45% in 2024.
A small increase.
Small one. But Human Rights Watch found little concrete evidence that the savings from peak wages were directly used to hire more young people.
So the link wasn't clear.
Not clear at all. In fact, the Ministry of Employment and Labor itself couldn't provide monitoring results on job creation for younger workers specifically linked to the system.
They couldn't track it.
Apparently not. Many employees in both public and private sectors reported not seeing increased hiring of younger staff due to these savings. In the public sector, for instance, hiring numbers are often fixed by government policy, so the money just ends up being used for annual operational costs.
Okay, so it just gets absorbed into the budget.
Pretty much. So if the purported benefit to youth employment is tenuous and the productivity argument is largely debunked,
Right.
what we're left with are significant negative impacts on older workers themselves.
Let's talk about those impacts.
Okay. Well, South Korea, shockingly, already has one of the highest elderly poverty rates among developed nations.
You mentioned this earlier, the poverty rate.
Yes, with a staggering 38% of those over 65 living below the poverty line.
38%. That's incredibly high.
It is. And these wage cuts cause substantial financial harm, averaging a 35% annual reduction for those affected.
A 35% cut on average.
Yeah. This doesn't just impact their current income, it can lead to reduced severance pay and lower pension contributions, creating a ripple effect on their long-term financial security.
So it affects their retirement savings, too.
Definitely.
Right.
And it also impacts their dignity, some older workers feeling useless or unwanted,
I can imagine.
particularly when their earnings can even fall below the national minimum wage in some cases.
The low minimum wage after decades of work.
It can happen.
So not only are they facing wage cuts and being pushed into precarious jobs, but the safety net designed to catch them is full of holes.
That's a good way to put it.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, if the very system intended to manage labor costs is actually creating an entirely new and perhaps even more expensive societal problem down the line.
It absolutely is. Mandatory retirement, often hastened by these wage cuts, frequently forces older workers into lower-paid, non-regular jobs.
Non-regular meaning.
Essentially, precarious contract or temporary roles, lacking the benefits, job security, and stability of full-time employment.
Got it.
In 2023, a staggering 69% of older wage earners were in non-regular work, almost double the rate for the general population.
69%, wow.
These roles, like janitors, security guards, or care workers, are often physically demanding, low status, and generally unappealing to younger workers,
Leading to
what's known as age-based occupational segregation. Older workers are being pushed into jobs that younger generations aren't willing or able to fill, creating a deeply divided labor market.
a two-tiered system based on age.
In effect, yes. And to compound this, the social safety nets currently in place are woefully inadequate.
How so?
Well, the National Old Age Pension, for example, covers only 27% of Seoul's living wage.
Only 27%.
Yeah. And the basic pension is just 16% of the national minimum wage.
It's incredibly low.
Even combined, their maximum income is only 41% of the national minimum wage.
Barely survival level.
And many older people on low incomes are still ineligible for critical support programs because their income is just above strict thresholds, leaving them in a desperate limbo.
Falling through the cracks.
Exactly.
So if the system's original goals aren't fully met, it's causing significant harm to older workers, and it no longer aligns with South Korea's pressing demographic challenges.
Right.
What are the proposed solutions? What alternatives are being discussed to move forward?
Well, one major proposal comes from President Lee Jae-myung, who has pledged to gradually raise the mandatory retirement age to 65.
Raising the retirement age. Okay.
The aim is to close the gap before pension eligibility begins. This proposal does have some institutional backing from government advisory panels and the Human Rights Commission.
So there's some support for it.
Yes, recognizing the need to keep experienced workers in the labor force longer.
But does that solve the peak wage issue?
That's the concern. Legal experts like labor lawyer Kim Ki-duk warn that simply raising the retirement age without simultaneously addressing the peak wage system could actually worsen discrimination.
How could it worsen it?
Well, it would simply give companies more years to apply those wage cuts, extending the period of diminished earning.
I see. More years of lower pay.
Exactly. So some, including Kim Ki-duk, argue the entire system should be abolished, allowing workers to continue as long as they are capable and wish to do so.
Just get rid of mandatory retirement and peak wage altogether.
That's one view. This view, ironically, sometimes puts them at odds with some major labor unions.
Really? Why?
Who often prefer extending the mandatory retirement age rather than scrapping mandatory retirement entirely, perhaps due to concerns about job security implications across different back groups.
Interesting tension there.
It is. Human Rights Watch advocates for a more comprehensive approach. They recommend abolishing both the mandatory retirement age and the peak wage system entirely.
Both gone.
Both gone. They also call for ensuring all age-based differential treatment in employment is rigorously justified by legitimate and proportionate means.
So real justification needed.
Yes, and implementing a broad anti-discrimination law and coupling this with public awareness campaigns to combat pervasive ageism in society and the workplace.
A multi-pronged approach. That makes sense. But are there other, more direct ways to support youth employment that don't rely on cutting older workers' pay?
Especially now, right?
Especially given the impending labor shortages where South Korea will need all its workers.
Absolutely, and the answer is yes. The peak wage system is definitely not a necessary component for increasing youth employment, and that's a critical point to understand.
Okay, so what else is there?
South Korea already has other initiatives in place that can be bolstered and expanded without penalizing older workers.
Like what?
For example, there's the National Employment Support System, which provides allowances, comprehensive counseling, and vocational training to young job seekers.
Okay, direct support.
Yes. There's also the Youth Employment Leap Incentive Program, which directly subsidizes employers for hiring young workers.
Incentives for companies.
Exactly. Plus, the Regional Youth Employment Networking Program and University Job Plus centers that connect students with job opportunities. These programs are far more targeted and effective at addressing youth unemployment directly.
So there are alternatives that don't pit generations against each other.
Precisely. They exist and can be strengthened.
This deep dive into South Korea's peak wage system isn't just about labor policy. It's a stark mirror, reflecting the profound societal challenge of how we value age, experience, and the very concept of a productive career in a rapidly changing world.
It really touches on fundamental questions.
What began as an attempt to manage labor transitions in a specific economic context now finds itself at a critical crossroads, grappling with profound demographic shifts it was never truly designed for.
The core tension remains. How can any society truly adapt its labor policies to support both its experienced older population and its burgeoning younger talent?
Yeah.
Fostering an environment of fairness, mutual respect, and economic dignity for every generation, especially as the demand for labor grows and societal structures evolve.
A complex balance to strike indeed.